Roughly 80% of China's groundwater is unfit for drinking. Decades of overmining have destroyed its forests. And unregulated industrial expansion has rendered its skies a constant smoggy gray. The CCP now has its eyes on Latin America to supply it with fresh resources and a new environment to pollute. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. In pursuit of endless growth, China has stripped its resources and decimated its environment, rendering its water, air, and land highly toxic. Yes, to grow, they destroyed their land. That's like trying to get taller by decapitating yourself. Although the CCP would never admit it now, its own 2016 study showed that over 80% of the groundwater in China's major river basins is unsafe for human consumption. Meanwhile, it also accounts for the highest levels of deforestation due to mining for raw materials in the world. The CCP would definitely be the final boss in a Captain Planet remake. And to top it all off, its air pollution levels are notoriously horrendous. No wonder, since it leads the world in new coal power plants and is by far the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases, accounting for more emissions than all the developed nations combined as of 2021. This highly unsustainable path is slowly turning China into a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Only it isn't slowly, they're speeding towards a Mad Max future faster than Mad Max racers. And the CCP is very aware. That's why they're turning to Latin America for resources and newer, greener pastures to destroy. Latin America is rich in almost every natural resource imaginable, but better yet, it's full of leftist leaders willing to appease the Chinese government for chump change, making it the ideal location for the CCP to usurp everything. Well, I guess it wouldn't be the first time authoritarian monsters sought refuge in South America. 11 out of 19 Latin American countries currently have left-wing, socialist, or outright communist leaders. I'm going to chalk that up to heat stroke. We all make terrible decisions when we're too hot and close to the equator. What's your excuse, North Korea? But China is especially interested in Communist President Nicolas Maduro's Venezuela and Socialist President Luiz Lula da Silva's Brazil, as well as Socialist President Luiz Arce's Bolivia and Leftist President Gabriel Boric's Chile. For all four of these countries, China is the biggest export partner. And true to form, the CCP is taking full advantage of the situation. Let's start with Brazil. In 2023, as soy prices continued to plummet, China became Brazil's biggest destination for the commodity. Leftists craving soy. Wow, all those memes were right. In return, Brazil has become home to a manufacturing complex for BYD, China's largest electric vehicle manufacturer. And Brazil is importing fire-prone Chinese EVs like never before. Sounds like a great deal. On top of that, China is making inroads into all sectors of the Brazilian economy in an effort to acquire commodities at much cheaper rates in yuan terms, since the Brazilian real is much cheaper than the US dollar and other major global currencies. China's trying to strip them bare like, appropriately, a Brazilian wax. How is it achieving this? Via the intergovernmental organization BRICS, of course. To add insult to injury, Brazil is selling large swaths of the Amazon rainforest to Chinese agricultural companies who chop down all the trees to make room for cattle pastures that, in turn, supply meat and milk to the homeland. Fun fact, Brazil is also China's biggest supplier of chicken feet. Let that sink in. The situation in Venezuela is much, much worse. And again, true to form, the CCP is taking all it can and giving nothing but made-in-China trinkets in return. Over the last couple of years, sanctions on Russia and Iran have partly disrupted China's oil supply chain. As sanctions on Venezuela oil begin to ease, it created the perfect opportunity for China to supplement its crude oil craze at a discount. Since last year, China's state-owned Sinochem has been buying barrels of Venezuelan Mare oil for an average of $20 less than Brent crude oil. With Venezuela in the midst of an almost decade-long economic crisis, this deal is obviously only beneficial for the CCP. I know, I'm also shocked that a country in the middle of a decade-long economic crisis would make a poor financial decision. What next? You're going to tell me an alcoholic enjoys whiskey? Fun fact, Venezuelans routinely face gas shortages even though the country has the world's biggest oil reserves. Ah, the beauty of state-owned monopolies. That's like finding out that Jeff Bezos, one of the richest men on earth, somehow ran out of head polish. Why wouldn't he just order more on Amazon? But that's not all. China is digging in deep with Venezuela. During Nicolas Maduro's visit to Beijing in September of last year, the two nations signed 31 agreements and conventions. The most notable change was that China and Venezuela upgraded their ties to an all-weather strategic partnership, which, according to the PRC's diplomatic doctrine, is the second highest level of partnership possible, behind only their strategic partnership and cooperation agreement for a new era with Russia and their Sino-North Korean mutual aid cooperation and friendship agreement with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which has a special place outside the entire hierarchy of relations. Wow, the CCP really needs to improve the way they name their diplomatic relations. Also, they're ranking their friends. It's hard to take a country seriously when they're treating foreign relations like my old MySpace top 8 from back in the day. But China isn't done with Venezuela yet. The PRC is aggressively pushing for the Latin nation to join BRICS, which makes perfect sense after the organization accepted democratic powerhouse Saudi Arabia, Iran, Ethiopia, and Egypt into its ranks. Wonder where they rank on China's friendship list. With Venezuela's acceptance, China would wield even more influence on the group than it does now. During his visit to Beijing, Nicolas Maduro also said he seeks to help establish new global geopolitics. Wait, is he trying to say New World Order but in a less scary way? Because this sounds like telling kids they're going to Disneyland when they're really going to the dentist. Whatever that means, it's implied that China would be at the forefront of this effort. So what does Venezuela get for selling itself to the PRC? A bunch of tofu-dreg infrastructure projects crumbling faster than China's economy, and vague security guarantees meant to protect the Maduro regime against potential American military aggression. Don't worry, Maduro. Comrade Xi has got your back. Probably not. I wish anyone I did business with was as big of a sucker as these leaders. Hey, if you give me this new car, I'll give you 3 sticks of bubble yum and add you to my top 8. Sold! The last major Latin American nation China is eyeing for resources is Bolivia. Bolivia recently discovered large lithium deposits in an area of the continent where it borders Argentina and Chile, forming what is known as the Lithium Triangle. And here's a real photo of China hearing this news. The recent election of anarcho-capitalist Javier Milei with his anti-China rhetoric in Argentina is casting doubt on bilateral relations between the two countries, and causing China to favor Bolivia over the other 2 Lithium Triangle nations. This is also made much easier due to Bolivia's far-left government, which traces its roots back to indigenous socialist leader Evo Morales. Lithium, otherwise known as white gold, is an essential mineral for producing batteries, which in turn are essential for producing fire-prone Chinese EVs. But that's okay. I mean, it's not like Bolivia is over 50% forests, and even if it is, it is. It's not like forests are flammable. In June 2023, the world's largest battery maker, Chinese-owned Contemporary Amperex Technology Limited, or CATL, signed a whopping $1.4 billion deal with the Bolivian government to develop lithium that is expected to grow to $10 billion over a decade. The stated intent is to help the Latin nation exploit its lithium reserves, but we all know very well it's the PRC that will be doing all the exploiting. In January 2023, Bolivia signed yet another billion-dollar deal with a Chinese company called CITIC Goan, which promises to help Bolivia build lithium refineries for the export market. This effectively gives Chinese companies control of Bolivian lithium from extraction to export, something the CCP is sure to take full advantage of for decades to come. Bolivia, for its part, isn't getting much for essentially handing all of its lithium to China. In 2018, then President Evo Morales signed into the Belt and Road Initiative under his 2025 Patriotic Agenda Plan, because nothing says patriotic more than letting another country come in, do everything for you, and wind up making it worse. The PRC was supposed to assist Bolivia in building 6 hydroelectric power plants and a highway linking its eastern regions to Paraguay and Argentina. To date, only 2 of the power plants have been completed, and the highway was only 50% complete as of 2020. Delays due to the pandemic have only made things worse. In 2021, the U.S. government did a case study on hydropower in Bolivia in conjunction with William Mary College in Virginia. They concluded that a number of the proposed Bolivian hydroelectric power plant projects failed to consult with local populations during planning phases, something that is required by both Bolivian and international law. But China views international law the same way gross guys at the airport view washing their hands after using a urinal. Optional. Not only that, but it also found that China's SOEs have ignored environmental impact assessments. These projects have negative impacts on the surrounding environment, including deforestation and loss of biodiversity. Long story short, after decades of decimating its own environment in its never-ending quest for the resources needed for global domination, the CCP is now looking to do the exact same thing in Latin America. They're like a spoiled, rich influencer who trashes their house and instead of cleaning it up, decides to go rent out and destroy another one. Wow, in this video I've compared the CCP to Nazis and influencers. You know they're evil. A friendly troop of leftist leaders heading some of the continent's biggest suppliers of the national resources China needs are making the CCP's advances go very, very smoothly. Since we cannot expect the lefty heads of state in Latin America to suddenly realize what a grave mistake it is to sell their souls to the CCP, the question then becomes what, if anything, can the US do about it, and how can this help our neighbors south of the border? One thing we can do is decouple from China. Pronto! I feel like I say that so often it might as well be in my sign-offs. Like, subscribe, and decouple from China. Recent developments have shown that it is indeed possible for countries to decouple from China even after decades of economic codependency, much like we did in 2023 when Mexico overtook the PRC as the biggest exporter of goods to the US. The good news is that the US is decoupling from China. And according to Bain & Company, as of 2021, other countries were following suit in decoupling from China. Because the Chinese economy is crumbling faster than its shoddy tofu dreg infrastructure. And foreign companies are realizing that it's morally irresponsible to work with a regime that runs concentration camps and harvest organs from political enemies. Nah, I'm just joking. They're pulling out because they realized working with a totalitarian regime is bad for business. I may not be happy with how they got there, but I'm happy that they got there. Furthermore, the Belt and Road Initiative has resulted in international backlash with allegations of debt trapping, corruption, environmental crimes, and broken commitments to social development, not to mention the fact that most BRI projects are years behind schedule. This has shown most of the world that China is an unreliable and shady business partner, one full of hidden agendas, deceit, and low-quality goods and services. The US and its Western allies need to capitalize on this with a large, healthy dose of capitalism, pun intended. Providing a viable alternative to Chinese goods and services through free market enterprise, transparent local partnerships, sustainability, and high-quality end products is surely something most leaders can get behind, especially when it's becoming more and more evident that the alternative is endless debt, toxicity, and crappy stuff. Now if we can just get Latin America to see it that way, and join the Planeteers in their battle against this Captain Planet final boss. Like the sense of humor I use on the show? I actually want to talk to you a bit about that. But first, the Chinese Communist Party hates China Uncensored. They even wrote about me in state-run media, calling China Uncensored disgraceful anti-China garbage. But with YouTube suppressing the show, I can't afford to keep making China Uncensored. Making the show and paying my staff isn't cheap, and the CCP would love it if I had to shut the show down. That's why I need your help. All it takes is $1 or more per episode on patreon.com/China Uncensored. I make about 16 episodes a month, and if that's too much for you, you can set a monthly limit. So you can ensure I keep uncensoring China for even $1 a month. And as a thank you to everyone who gives on Patreon, I'll answer one of your questions at the end of these episodes. Today's question comes from Cooper Stern. How likely is China to invade Russia instead of Taiwan? Since the West would most likely step in on Taiwan's behalf, wouldn't Russia, who's bogged down in Ukraine, be a better target? With all the problems in China leading towards its implosion, the only real route for Xi is to reestablish control by winning a war. And since they're iffy on taking on the US, wouldn't Russia be a perfect target? They were planning on stabbing them in the back anyway. Now that's a very interesting question. China and Russia do have territorial disputes. In the 19th century, China lost a bunch of land to Russia, and today, the CCP is laying claim to that land. According to an official map published last year, China redefined its borders with its neighbors, including Russia. That map included 8 Russian cities and areas, including Russia's port city of Vladivostok, as part of Chinese territory. Would China actually fight to take that from Russia? I doubt it. Remember, Russia does have nukes, and Russia has threatened to use them against China in a previous land grab. China most likely could use economic leverage to make a deal to get all or some of it back. Russia is increasingly dependent on China because of sanctions over the Ukraine war. That could be pretty likely. Russia needs money, so they sell back the land. Could be very possible. Thanks for your question and your support, Cooper. Now, you might have gathered that I believe in the power of humor. I think it's a really effective way to tackle authoritarians and hard times in general. And that's the theme of the latest episode of my new show, Deep Thoughts While Gaming, about Arizona Sunshine 2, a zombie VR shooter with a very particular sense of humor. Check it out and let me know what you think. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored. Decouple from China.